Ladies and gentlemen, my name's Achille Okaya. I'm professor of food science and technology at Makerere University. And I'm happy to meet my fellow Kaya here. Yeah, actually, I don't know who is older, but my name is spelled with K, just K-A-A-Y-A, K-A-A-Y-A, and his is K-A-Y-A. But the pronunciation is more or less the same, why we are here. But if we were in Uganda, he would be Kaya, and I would be Kaya. So there's a difference. So I've been teaching in Makerere University for the last 31 years, and I've been heading the Department of Food Technology and Nutrition, and I ceased to be head of department end of this month. I'm happy that there is a democracy. After 2 terms, one has to go. But when I was coming here, I was asked a question. What are you going to do with history if you are a food scientist? I mean, relating the two may not be quite easy, but to me, really, there is a very big relationship, and I'm proud of coming here to learn a lot of how history actually has contributed to our development, especially how it relates to agriculture, to food security, and others. My area of specialization is food safety, and I know food safety is a very big component of food security, because if it is not safe, it is not food. And of course, without history and culture, there's no way food security, food safety can actually be addressed. Historically, we know very well that Africa is known for a number of scientific and developmental achievements. And yesterday I was trying to learn about history of Africa, and I came across a very good statement written by somebody, and it reads, scientific discovery and the application of technology to the natural environment have been essential to the history of Africa and in the development of African diaspora throughout the world, implying that really Africa has had a number of developments, a number of achievements, both scientifically and technologically, which have really contributed to the development of the entire world. So we should not really underlook ourselves. And when Africans actually migrated, either through conditions of slavery or voluntary, travel, they went away with their technologies. The technologies were never left behind. And I think these technologies, together with the labor that they used, have been the key, issues in the development of countries like the USA. So I think we need to think a lot, on the knowledge that has actually been acquired. And it's always said that Africans can, conquer a number of ecological, environments successfully, meaning that they can live anywhere in the world. Global knowledge, develops the skills, individuals and organizations, need to have in order to be successful under different, conditions of this ever-changing world. So I think this is going to be very, very interesting, that we are going to be relating the history and the development, the entrepreneurship, how it actually relates to this global knowledge economy worldwide. Let me also remind you that, as has been said, indigenous foods have been with us, and they have contributed greatly to food security in our country. And they have been actually copied and taken elsewhere, and they have been developed further by the Western world when we are just looking fermentation technologies, have been with us here. And these technologies, right now, the organisms which are responsible for fermentation technologies, which were used by our grand, people, have been now taken away, and they are being used to make several, products in the Western world. Fire, I think, was also invented here in Africa. I think I remember reading about that some time back. So there are several Africans who are developing the world everywhere. What are we exactly doing? Therefore, I don't want to take any more time. The question now is, how do we actually harness this wealth of scientific and technological development to build the Africa that we actually want? I therefore take this opportunity to introduce to you the panelists who are here. We have got Professor Y.N. Sereti, who is the Chief Director, Science Missions, Department of Higher Education, Science and Technology in South Africa. We are welcome, Professor. We also have Professor B.C. Nindi from the Limpopo Department of Economic Development, Environment and Tourism in South Africa. Welcome, Professor. Then we also have Professor Tholeni Sodi, Head, Department of Psychology, University of Limpopo, South Africa. You're welcome. And we have got Miss Catherine Natuhwera, Smart Haven Africa, Uganda. Welcome, my fellow Ugandan. And last but not least, we have got Miss Senamire Masango, nuclear scientist, and Semine Masango Foundation, South Africa. You're welcome. So without wasting time, let me invite, we did not agree on what they are supposed to talk about, since the topic is actually very clear. So I first of all invite Professor Sereti to give your views. And I would like everybody to talk for about maybe 5 minutes. And thereafter, I open the discussion to the floor. So thank you very much, Professor.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Chair. I'm glad that you've given us 5 minutes, because the themes, we could all go home with 40, 30 minutes on that. Now, let me just commence. 5 minutes is very little for the portfolio that I need to share with you. However, I've already mentioned that the IKS policy came to being through the leadership of Dr. Wally Serote when he was the chair of the portfolio committee, and Professor Kaya and others met in 1998 in Mafeking to begin the idea, culminating in the policy of 2004. Now, this policy of 2004 has 4 drivers. There's one for social cohesion, which the Department of Arts and Culture drives. There's one focal point for services, which the Department of Health drives. And then there is one for interfacing knowledge, indigenous knowledge, into the innovation system, which the Department of Science and Technology then drives. And the last one, the 4th one, is about commercialization of indigenous knowledge. Now, this policy has been reviewed by the presidency, the Department of Monitoring and Evaluation, and to an extent in which almost 90% of that policy has been achieved. And there's still some areas that needs to be tackled. Now, the area for which I am responsible goes through probably, I am responsible for paleosciences, archaeology, for global change, which is climate change, earth system science, marine, polar and Antarctica research, and indigenous knowledge. So they're very different kinds of works, But let me begin with paleosciences. As most of you know, the early history of this country goes back to 3 billion years. And I think the Freedom Park are better positioned to cover that. But in the history of ideas, we can go back to about 80,000 years from today with the paintings in the caves. There's a lot of stone paintings in this country. And now if you look at that, those are ideas. The ideas around the science of how they mixed that kind of paint that has remained for so many thousands of years to this day. And yet we haven't paid attention to that science and the technologies that were used. And so the history of ideas can be traced back to documented history from the paintings. So that is also science. It's paleosciences that contributes to that. But with looking at paleosciences, we can look at the history also that contributes to your studies on climate change. What was the landscape of the land we live in some 80,000 years ago? What sort of indigenous foods were the communities eating? So as much as you, all of you, want to focus on the present past, I want to put it to you that the pursuit of the idea of history of ideas goes back all the way to 80,000 years ago. And we need to push our agendas back then to see where we have come from. I must move on quickly to say that apart from tracking and changing the departure point of looking at our histories, we also have a program in the department, which we have started a long time ago about the National Recorder System. In each one of the province, we have succeeded to have an indigenous knowledge recorder system. This University of KwaZulu-Natal and University of Zululand host some of those centers where the ideas, the knowledge of the local communities is captured. At the moment, we focused on traditional medicine and indigenous foods. Now, this, and I've got a couple of those people driving the process. Ngomalo is seated at the back here, and there's Zodwa behind my pillar, who are driving that process in this province. And every province, I've got one. So we must record. We must cease from just talking about it. We must record the knowledge. Keep it in there. If we are to fast track into the next phase, we have also built a knowledge system within the country. Professor Tefo did talk about the BIKS, but we also have put research chairs in universities. One of the leading research chairs that we had put was at Walter Sisulu University. The intention of that chair was to systematize indigenous knowledge to a level in which we can be competitive with other knowledges. We've had a research chair here in traditional medicines. We have, so in a way, we're trying to look at that as part of the collection of the history of ideas, elevated to the highest level of theorizing. We have also attempted, from the last 6 years, or maybe 10 years, to establish a center of excellence in indigenous knowledge. This CIKS, which organized this, is seeded so that it can eventually result in a center of excellence, and I hope that this year we'll finalize the declaration of this center as a center of excellence. Probably to be one of the first few centers of excellence in this country to be driven by an African agenda, because in other centers it is different agendas. We also have research. We put money. Every year people apply for research, and some of the chairs of those kind of things, we have Professor Nechendama in the presence, who have also chaired those research grants. So at the knowledge generation, it's important that we invest in the collection of generating knowledge. Africans must cease from just merely talking You are a silent majority that doesn't do research. We need to transform that to get you to be researchers and publishers if we have to keep the knowledge going. We then move on to the other platform on innovation. We've also had a bioprospecting platform which works around investing in innovation. We have been using the Council for Scientific and Industrial Research, but that's incubation. We have moved also to the Technological Innovation Agency, talking about food science and the like. We just are establishing a food technology platform at the University of Venda, working with the TIA, Technological Innovation Agency. And I was talking to the young people from the University of Zululand that they need to find synergy on how they can use such a platform to advance their ideas and incubation. We are also working with the Department of Trade and Industry to begin to break through the business cycle. Now, all these things that I've talked about to you, we have converted them into a legislation so that we don't just talk about a mandate that's not legislated. We have gone through the country, through the parliament, and through the National Council of Provinces. This legislation has been completed and is sitting in the presidency. So anytime it will be written off, which means that in the history of ideas, in the developing of these ideas to harness and contribute to entrepreneurship, the value chain that I've spoken to, from collection of knowledge in the communities to the marketplace, would have been covered by legislation. And this is, I think, is an important contribution to empower the people of South Africa. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. And let me thank the organizers, actually, for doing the work which they've done, especially this concept of inviting young minds. To me, I think that is quite innovative. Very briefly, because I've just have 5 minutes, I'm going to take my short footnote in this discussion, looking at the theme of what I have to talk about: harnessing the contribution of history of African science, technology, entrepreneurship in the global knowledge economy. And that is going to be my point of departure. Now, we are talking global. Now, if you talk global, very brief history of this term global actually gives us few good lessons to learn. If you look at the first industrial revolution, at that time, Africa as a continent was in the hands of the West and went through the phase of international slave trade. 2, during the second industrial revolution, Africa was going through the phase of colonization, partition, etc., as a result of the Berlin Conference and the like. So you could see that Africa in all these revolutions seems to be powerless, with all the successes which you have seen in terms of science, technology, astronomy in Egypt, Mali, etc. During the third industrial revolution, Africa now was at the verge of waking up. That was the time when decolonization started to take place. And as a result of that, a number of proxy governments were formed, and in certain parts we created dictatorships. There's conflicts, instability. That's why actually I'm very happy to listen to our very few commanders, the lady here, going to Congo, just to go and try to put that stability. Paradoxically, I'm not going to the fourth one, if you look in terms of resources, when you look at the works of World Resource Institutes, it is spelled out categorically, very clearly. Africa is the richest continent in the world. We have everything. Now, following this, At this stage now, we're going through the fourth industrial revolution. Now, going through the fourth industrial revolution, Africa has to make a decision. Are we going to be spectators? Are we going to be participants? What are we going to do? Very briefly, for those who have been watching TV recently, in all the major medias, you have this anniversary, 50 years of the men going to the moon. When you look at that scenario, you think that Africa was not there. But the landing of that spaceship on the moon was directed by an African, an Egyptian scientist, who was interviewed and actually explained how he did it. And then when you look at the mathematical part of it, in terms of, because there were over, actually 5,000 people were involved in that whole exercise. The one who was heading the area where you had calculus, mathematics, etc., is an African from Nigeria. I'm just giving you these few examples. So we have no excuse of saying that in Africa, we don't have brains. Because these brains are there, and they have actually shown that they can do all what is required to be done. The point which I want us to note and not to forget, it seems we have always been the victims in all these revolutions. And we have not defined the agenda, and we've never controlled that agenda. And as a result of this, that's where I think His Excellency, the former President of Ghana, was very clear. I think the challenges which we have on the continent is how to do the basics, to get the basics right. And to me, I think that has been a problem, and that seems actually to reproduce itself. Very briefly, I recall when I was in those youthful stages like these guys, when we were young at the university. I studied one of the universities where, the Vice Chancellor left here, Dar es Salaam. We had a committee that is in the 70s called the Committee for the Liberation of Southern Africa. Yes. So I was the deputy chair there, and that's a place where I had the privilege to meet people like Sam Nujoma and quite a number of other liberation movements. All the liberation movements, Mwalimu had created space there. So I was that. And we were raising resources, mobilizing, doing all sorts of things. We are committed. And in politics, I think, with a bit of calmness, I'll talk to my colleagues from Uganda, because at that time, one of our seniors is the current president of Uganda, Museveni. Museveni was one of these guys who was extremely very militant, very radical. He used to go to Mozambique, the place where I was liberated by Frelimo, trying to support and do things. So if you see the young Museveni and the mature Museveni, the old Museveni, they are different Musevenis. Yes, you see. Absolutely. Yeah. And that's actually the challenge which you have in the continent. I'm just using that as an example. So we must actually now, and that's why I think it's unfortunate the young people have left. We really need to take control of our destiny. Mm. At this stage, it is actually, I don't know if it's shameful is the right way to talk about. When you see Africans dying trying to go to Europe. Some of us, it's that privilege. We studied in Europe, we stayed in Europe, we were fed up with it. Yes, quite a bit of yes. I've studied it for years. It's not worth trying to go there, you see. But you see Africans leaving their country to go actually and say, okay, no, but definitely I'm going to leave the continent. Let me just go and die in the Mediterranean Sea. What sort of Africa are we creating? With all these resources which you have. I think these are some of the basic fundamental questions which we need to ask ourselves. Yeah. And then I think I really don't I don't like excuses. I like to call a spade a spade. Yeah. There are certain things which are not right. And the problem with we Africans at this stage, we try to to actually internalize and accept them. To me, it's actually one of our colleagues you're talking about banning schools. You cannot, whatever problems you've had, you cannot tell me that your problems will be resolved by banning a school or banning a clinic. That is wrong. We've all collectively to agree. So we need to go start from the family. You know, we socialize our kids in saying that, guys, this is how things should be done, irrespective of all the challenges. Because okay, let me just give you this very simple analogy. You ban a school here, yes. After that, the provincial government will try to find money, they'll go and they'll build your schools. Once they build their schools, they'll have few money for grandpa, panado, and other things. You get my point? Because all this money comes from the same pot. The challenge which we have in Africa, I think this is something which cuts across all African countries. First, we have to learn how to save resources, to save costs. Not to be unnecessarily extravagant. Actually, I liked when we had the inauguration here, the president said, no, this time we are going to cut costs. A brilliant idea. I think that thinking to me makes a lot of sense because that money could be used and spent in other factors. Now, let me go to the fourth industrial revolution now, the fourth one which we have. When you go to the fourth industrial revolution, I think we cannot run away from it because that part is part of this global challenge. And I think one of the things which we started when we were at school is the dynamism of international capitalist system, which is something which we've ignored to talk. Capitalism is a system with the ability to accumulate wealth and poverty, and it changes all the time and so forth, it adapts. Now we are in the phase of globalization and the like. But Africa is always whenever you have all these things, there are two parts. You can either be a winner or you can be a loser. If you take globalization, you can use it to your own advantage. Let Africa do that. And you can't be playing victim all the time. So there are certain skills which we need to do. I'll give you another very simple example. Now it's very popular to do heart transplants of different things. Yeah, I think you'll follow that debate, heart transplantation. You know, the first heart transplant concept started here in South Africa. Now it's global, it's everywhere. So I think we have everything, but the challenge which you have here is just like when you go to India. If you talk about poor people, I think one of the things which, and I'm just taking that as an example, don't misquote me. The first time when I went to India, I was shocked at the poverty patterns and the like in the country, the terrain. And then actually, I was with a colleague, my colleague from here, and we were talking, and then we were jokingly saying, I think if you actually take some of our colleagues to see this, they'll think the poverty we're talking about in South Africa is just acting in Isidingo. He said, that is, yes, he was saying that, yeah, because we haven't seen it. I think there are a lot of blessings we have here, and not only here, in the whole continent, but we don't wear them nicely. See, I think that starts from the family. That starts at home. So we need to get, I think, in concluding, I think I finished my 5 minutes. I think the point which I want to say, I think we need the right skills. And then I think it's dangerous to try and go for shortcuts. You need to get the right skills so that we fit in the fourth industrial revolution. So we understand what artificial intelligence is all about. We know how to use big data to make business more productive and more efficient and the like and so on. We need to do a bit of robotics and the like. And the university should move fast. Because the problem with the university is that they have tradition. Before you change anything, it is start from the department, go to the faculty politics, go to the Senate foreign politics. They have to go to the vice chancellor is sick, it has to wait. So it takes time, but things don't work in business, it doesn't go like that. You have to work with the speed. So we need the right skills, and then that's where I think these skills will give us power to internalize indigenous knowledge, IKA systems, and everything. Because this, actually, the way I see it to be, IKA is very simple. It's a resource, and that is power. It's a resource which you need to internalize and make use of it. And when you use it, we shouldn't use it and be victims. We shouldn't use it and be losers, because it has started with us. I think I could have continued, but because of time factor, thank you, gentlemen and ladies. Thank you.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. As we have had since this morning, all protocol observed. Just one little correction in terms of the program. I see it says Professor Thuleni Sodi, Head of Department of Psychology. I have liberated myself from headship of department, so I'm just a professor of psychology at the University of Limpopo. I thought I should just make that point quite clear. So I looked at the program and I looked at the document that was circulated, and I realized that this is, for me, really a very important topic. And I then decided that the 3 or 5 minutes that I'm going to have is essentially going to focus on shaking off the shackles of mental oppression. And I think this, for me, relates very well to what I see as a theme of this conference. I think, ladies and gentlemen, you are aware that our problems, to a large extent, as a continent, can really be traced to colonialism. And in the South African context, colonialism can actually be exemplified by the arrival of Jan van Riebeeck in the Cape in 1652. This has already been mentioned right in the morning. Now, colonialism manifested itself actually in 2 forms: physical oppression and mental oppression. Physical oppression, we have witnessed the manifestations of that in many ways, and we have seen this in the form of land dispossession, the brutality that has been there in the continent, and a whole range of socio-economic problems that we still have today. But the one serious manifestation of colonialism that I think has not really received the attention it deserves is mental oppression. And of course, I chose to speak about that as a psychologist because I think that is something that I see quite a lot in our people. So, how do we see mental oppression? And what are the consequences that we are living with, which are an indication of mental oppression? So we see deep psychological wounds and scars. And these are the wounds and scars that have moved with us from generation to generation. What in psychology we would usually call intergenerational trauma. We see a lot of this unresolved psychological problems as a result of colonialism and mental oppression. See a lot of unresolved anger. Something has been mentioned here around banning of schools, proverbially cutting off our noses in order to spite our faces. So these indications of unresolved anger, and this anger is directed towards others and towards ourselves. We see a lot of self-hate, and of course, to a large extent, something we see in the political circles, self-doubt. a lot of programs that we have in the continent are not being implemented by our leaders because sometimes it is all about self-doubt. One example we have in our country is the whole issue of land. And I'm aware that this is a very sensitive matter to talk about, but in the last few months, last few years, the land question has become very critical in our country. And we have always been talking about maybe we need to change the constitution, maybe we need to do this, maybe we need to do this. And you look at it and you realize in actual fact, there is nothing that stops us from going ahead to reclaim what actually should belong to the African people. But now the problem is, as Africans, for some reason, because of that historical reality, we continue to doubt ourselves. And so we are not assertive enough to actually say this is what should happen. Maybe to quote from one of the prominent African Caribbean scholars, Owen Alik Shahada. He was born in Hanover in Germany. And he says mental oppression is far more sinister than physical slavery because the chains are invisible and are transmitted across generations. If African slavery was only physical, African people would have, within one generation, been able to skip the plethora of socio-economic issues which plague African people. So this is just an illustration of the seriousness of mental oppression and how we have continued to live with that to an extent that even when we are supposed to be free, we continue to live with the oppression that is there mentally. Now, what is the way forward? I think the only and sensible way forward for us as Africans is indeed to shake off the shackles of mental oppression. I think that's exactly what we need to do, to stand tall and to believe that we can liberate ourselves, and we alone can shape our own destiny. As I was looking through the Agenda 2063, the Africa that we want, I was particularly intrigued by clause number 4. Clause number 4 in that document says, we rededicate ourselves to the enduring Pan-African vision of an integrated, prosperous, and peaceful Africa, driven by its own citizens and representing a dynamic force in the international arena. I do believe this wonderful ideal will not be achieved if we continue to feel mentally oppressed. So until such time when we can shake off the shackles of mental oppression, this will continue to remain distant dreams. So it is important for us to always remember that as we go about trying to achieve what we want to achieve as Africans, as long as mentally we are still not free, we will continue to have these challenges. And maybe just to conclude, I hope my 5 minutes have expired now. To conclude with one line from Bob Marley's song, Redemption. I'm sure all of us know that, and I'm sure many of us know what I'm going to say. Emancipate yourselves from mental slavery. None but ourselves can free our mind. I thank you.
Good evening, gentlemen and ladies. I'm Catherine Atwera. I'm privileged to work with engineers from Smart Havens Africa who have come up with the idea of construction of houses which are eco-friendly, sustainable, and low cost. And also, I'll talk about the topic of today, mostly as a youth. I've just graduated from the university, Makerere University, 3 years back. Yeah, and most of us, the youth, like when we're at the university, we sit down, we are targeting for these high companies. You're like, going to finish school, I want to work with the UN, I want to work with a bank. We don't look at Africa and its resources. Africa has a full basket of content. We just need to take up the knowledge and digest it in. Because we have the agriculture sectors, the construction. When you look at the art in Egypt, everything is so to us, it's us who don't digest the knowledge in it. Like I personally, when we were growing up, our mother used to give us a lot of traditional, how may I call it? We had a lot of activities taking place, like making mats, like clothes, like personally, I don't buy most of my clothes. This top takes me like 5 minutes, 10 minutes to make it. So we need to really bring up what we have, look on how we can use it. Talking more about Smart Havens Africa, our construction base, we target the low-income earners. And here we target mostly the youth. When you finish school, start working, by the time you own a home, those are like 10 years, 20 years. And homes in Uganda are now left up to the high-privileged, people who have a lot of money, people who have made it in life. And by the time one gets to own a stable home, and you know what a home means, you have to be, like, it is the beginning of a home. A good home reflects a lot on what you will do outside, because it brings the comfort, you feel comfortable and everything is okay. And so when you finish work and you have nowhere to stay and everything is not okay with you, And about the technology and science and entrepreneurship, I would encourage the youth to embrace it so much so that they are able to compete with the globe at large. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Protocol observed. So my name is Senamile Masango. I'm a nuclear scientist. I'm a first African woman to conduct a first African-led experiment at CERN that was conducted 2017. I'm also, because I strongly believe that as African, we must also bring other African, especially her, because to break all the stereotypes that science belong to the certain gender and science belong to the certain race. So that is why I am a founder of Senamile Masango Foundation that provide leadership, role model, mentorship to young girls from disadvantaged communities. I'm an advocate of quality education because no one chooses to be poor. You can go to YouTube, all my speeches, they're all there. Even I've also been honored to address our own president more than 3 times about the quality of education. So back to our topic for today. So I will always go to the basic. Our contribution to science and technology is being hampered by the problem arising from rationalized views of history. There are a lot of images that Africa is poor. When we go outside Europe, Africa is poor, is backward. we were suffering, we are dying, and, and also we are incapable of intellectual contributions that might contribute toward the development. Hence, they will be surprised to see a slaying scientist like me. I'm always on fleek, all the time. Okay, however, despite all these images, the fact is, Africa are gainful employed. We have a lot of doctors, we have a lot of scientists, engineers, and professors where in Europe, in America. That alone is demonstrate the contribution of African development. So the whole legacy of slavery is undermining and limiting African contribution to development. People all over the world, they think Africa, you have nothing to offer in terms of scientific knowledge. We have to address all these stereotypes of African as an underachieving. So that is why we need scientific leaders. Because us as scientists, we like to fold our hands and let people to make decisions for ourselves. It's only us scientists who understand our own problem. Let's go to the politicians. Let's get us involved. Go to the society to fill in the gap between of science and society. I'm sure in this room, no one knows what is a nuclear scientist. I'm sure it's even your first time to see the nuclear scientist. So I have to go out there. My story is all over the internet. If you Google Senamile Masango, you will find my story. Because I have to tell my story. Because us as young women, in fact, I'm still young, but I don't want to be called young. Us as young girls, we are discouraged at the early age that science is not for us. So who's going to break that? It's us as young people. So we must go there. Okay, let me continue my story. I will just pour my heart. Whatever I'm going to talk about here, it's what we are doing in our foundation as well. So I will just pour my heart. You will never see me again. Okay, I just want to brainwash, to erase whatever that is in our mind. The contribution of African people in STEM has helped in shaping the modern world through slavery. Ask yourself this question. Why slavery was necessary in developing countries? Why? Because we had a skill. And there were a lot of skills that were transferred through what? Through what? I don't want people to sleep when I'm talking. You must engage Bazalwane with me. I command attention. I want my attention. Through what? Yes. Through slavery. According to the research, what we have done, pyramids of Egypt that show engineering and architecture, right? We had a great knowledge of copper, iron, and gold, right? Agriculture, we've contributed in rice production, yes. So Africa science need more leaders. Training program for scientists that include leadership skills. That one is very important. In our curriculum, they don't teach us about leadership. So we need to lead projects as scientists. We need to lead projects as scientists because I believe that science is something that we can use to solve what? Our own problems as what? As Africans. Because, sometimes I got upset because our leaders, I think sometimes they are failing us up. Whenever there is a problem in Africa, we always outsource. Hence, in all the institutions, we have graduates of engineers. Why don't we teach them innovation so that we can solve our own problems and so that we'll be innovative? And again, shucks, my handwriting. Okay, I'm going there. Don't worry, I'm landing now. I'm about to land. I said I'm not going to come back. I will just sit after that. Okay, so university, what needs to be done? University and school does not equip young people like me for the life of inventors and self-starters. Current African education system does not seem to reflect the reality on the ground. We must be taught science that speak to us as Africans. We are tired of Einstein, our godfather. What has African done? There are a lot of things that African has done. We need to bridge the gaps between rural and urban. That is why our foundation is focusing with rural areas. Economic transformation of Africa is not possible without tapping to the potential of what? Young people. We must build skills, capacity to young people in ICT. We are going to the Industrial Revolution. Coding is essential. It is essential in the continent to become a global economy that is competitive, interconnected, and highly digitalized. However, we as young scientists, we are facing a lot of challenges. That is why we leave our country and even at academia. Unfortunately, the system does not absorb young scientists. You can go in all institutions, from West to UCT, I'm based in Cape Town, to UCT, to KwaZulu-Natal, it does not absorb you. Young people, you will only find old age home. This means we lose trained people because we will live. Personally, I will go live and go where? To Europe instead of solving my own problem because of political instability, better opportunities, lack of resources, lack of funding. But there is potential as Africans. So we must be positive and contribute toward our society. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Masango, and thank you very much, my panelists, for those brilliant ideas. I want to open the discussion to the floor because we have a few minutes, but maybe before that, I want to ask you a question, and any of you can actually maybe answer it. I think you have mentioned, most of you have mentioned it a little bit, the issue of politics, the political environment. In February, when I was I went to Addis Ababa to attend the food safety conference, which was organized by African Union. And 2 days before, there was a summit of African leaders talking about challenges in Africa. And a journalist wrote in one of the newspapers that Africa's problems are meeting to discuss African problems. That the leaders are the Africa's problems. And they were meeting to discuss how to solve African problems. Very unfortunate. So do you see really our political environment, as far as the political leaders are concerned, really enabling us to harness the contribution of history, to scientific and technological development in Africa? Any of you maybe can have a comment on it, Professor Nindi, or anybody can come and comment on it, and thereafter we shall open the floor.
I think it's a big generalization because the different generations of leadership who have emerged on the continent and who have attempted to look for solutions. So to put them in the same basket is unfortunate. I mean, we've just had an example of an excellent leader here this morning. And to consider that you would be a problem to the continent is unfortunate.
If you read the history of African science, you will conclude that Africa has been the cradle of mankind. Africa has been the cradle of food security. Africa has contributed, as the last speaker spoke, to the development of the Americas in many ways. And if you look at the technologies of the Africans, it traverses many fields, from agriculture to manufacturing, to metallurgy, to pharmacology, to chemistry, orthopedics, and all that, including obviously architecture. And there's a good example of the pyramids, the cathedrals, the forts, the churches, the mosques. All these were built by engineers from Africa. One of the interesting stories that I read was that Kingston, a city in Jamaica, and Newport in Rhode Island, those buildings were done by descendants from Africa, from Ghana. So you're talking of the whole city being developed by an African. My plea is this. Because you are talking about educating our youth, what better ways to educate the youth than giving them the evidence of our history in terms of technology development by writing a book. There was a book written by Rodney. It is called How Europe Underdeveloped Africa. Surely we can write a book, a good one, on how Africa developed the Americas. There is such a lot of evidence. And you can complement that through oral histories of the elders who were born in the 20s and the 30s. I mean, what a gift. Please think about it.
Sanibonani. Ngiyabonga mphathi wohlelo. Ngugogo Sithole mina. From the South Coast. I'm a healer. I'm a mother, I'm a granny. But I'm an activist in my community. And I'm a founder of an NPO there. Kuthiwa uma kuhlatshiwe ekhaya noma imbuzi noma inkomo inyama ayidleki because there's too much meat, you don't feel like taking even a piece. But when the visitors have gone and the nyama is finished, it's only then that you long for a piece of meat. So organizers of this conference, thank you very much. We are gaining a lot, I'm being enriched, but as an old goat, as you can see me, most of the things that are being talked about here are relevant to me. My main concern is, how do we take it to other people? How do we take it to our youth? That's the main problem. How do we decolonize our minds, other people's minds, our communities, our children? Next month, it's August. It's Women's Month. So all over South Africa here, and I'll talk about KZN because that's where I am, there'll be functions of women celebrating, women in business, women in leadership, intellectuals, academics. But I have decided in my community from last year, 2018, that every August, we're going to have a function for the old ladies, the pioneers of the craft market where we stay, women who started selling from the roads to the passerbys, women who have used craft.
Summarize, please.
Okay, I will,
Yeah.
yes. Thank you. Women who have been able to use their hands to open a very big market along the South Coast, those who know the South Coast. And I've decided that every year we must honor them, thank them, encourage them, but most of all, where we are looking at as an NPO is that we want to teach the young ones. We're starting with the daughters and the sons of those people to empower them with the skills and teach them business skills so that they also feel they are appreciated, so that we show the young ones the wealth that Africa has. I'm very proud of you, Snamile, Catherine, now a Mama Ngiti, as women. What you shared here, I'm taking along with me to the South Coast, and I'm hoping I'll be able to invite you when we do these functions to empower youth people to recognize their skills, to make awareness for the wealth that Africa has. Thanks.
Good afternoon. My name is Upilisiwe Precious Mazibugo. I work at the Center for Civil Society at UKZN Howard College. And I also work in an organization called the Durban Peace Builders. And our primary objective when we started was to do workshops and programs where we integrate foreign nationals into South African communities and sort of build social cohesion between the various races that you'll find in the community and the different people that you'll find there. And it's been a very difficult space to work in, where I've realized that as African people, it's difficult to speak to each other, to relate to each other, to get along in the same space with each other for various reasons, be they political or economical. But it's just been a real uphill battle for us as an organization to bring in the different groupings of people that we'll find in our different spaces. And in thinking about the fourth industrial revolution, how I'm also just thinking in my head and the different developments that have been happening around that, of having robots that are going to be nannies, that are going to be looking after children, robots that are going to be teachers, teaching children in schools. And I'm thinking, how are we going to get to a place where we can have a robot stand in front and teach children and sort of build a nation when it's already difficult to do that ourselves with people in a space or in a world where we live, where there's so many inequalities already. And we're going to add another element of inequality where for you to be able to communicate with somebody in another country, you're going to need a smartphone so that you can Skype with them. And I'm thinking, as leaders, many other leaders have spoken today and said, fourth industrial, no, it's good, you're promoting it. How do you as a leader envision an Africa where we're able to integrate these things? Do you think that as the different African countries, we have the infrastructure to support the fourth industrial revolution? As much as we can say, okay, no, bring fourth industrial, it's development, it's whatever, all these good things. How are we going to do it as Africans? You were speaking about an Africa that we want. Do we want an Africa where ugogo, we've been saying it's important for young children to go back home and sit with ugogo and find out all of these indigenous knowledge. How is it going to be for ugogo Loyo? How is she going to be able to communicate with her grandchildren? Because she first has to go through a process to learn how to operate this phone. And I'm not seeing it working in Africa. How do you as leaders think this thing is going to be able to integrate into our communities, into our spaces, and develop us and create us into these pioneer Africans?
I really stopped here because I wanted to support the two women on the panel, which is why I never left. And I find that it's very deliberate sometimes that women are put at the last of a program. And so my sadness and my joy was that you still turned up and you presented in such a passionate way. But I would have loved for the young children to have met a nuclear scientist. You know, I'm like, what am I doing here hearing you speak? But I hope that you'll have more chance to come and be at the front of the program. What also saddens me when you talk about the academic spaces, where women who are in these spaces become the dragons that keep other women out. And I really feel somebody like you need to kick those doors down and push those women aside, because many of the women who are inside, it's about their salary, it's about their thing. But we can't let you go away and not come into academic spaces, because I tell you, I've run an organization for 22 years. I've never been paid by anyone to do what I do today. So the point I want you to do is to really get in there, because you shying away from academic spaces mean that girls don't have access to you. And I really believe that it's important that women have access to somebody like you, because we don't have many of you. And especially the Ugandan women, when you talked about 10 minutes of making your clothes, it's something that you need to say quite often. Because in markets in South Africa, you have to go for hours on end to get a material to be made. But in other African countries, last week I was in Rwanda, they made me 3 outfits in 2 days. And I was only there for 3 days. So you need to send that message that we can deliver, we can produce. And I really want to hear more of your voices. Siabong.
I will just read what I've prepared here, what needs to be done. First things first, we need to build the capacity of teachers to enable them incorporate of technology in the curriculum. That is the first thing that we must do. So we must upskill our teachers, retrain our teachers, then to preach 4th IR without training of the teachers. Who's going to teach these teachers? Are we going to also outsource teachers from Europe to come and teach our kids? No way. So we must, first thing first, upskill, train the teachers, and then fix our basic education. Of course, science, it's a practical module, which means we must also provide them with kits. We must also provide them with infrastructure. Thank you.
I want to ask the two of you, what can be done to create space for young people in terms of scientific disciplines, in terms of entrepreneurship, in terms of global knowledge, so that we have more young people occupying this space? One thing I don't particularly like is the dichotomization of men versus women. I have a daughter, I have a wife, I have aunties, and my mind is constantly on them and how to make it possible for them to make progress. But often when we are in public forums like this, it's like it's one versus the other, but it's never like that. So advise us.
IBM has basically looked at Africa as a nation, and they looked at artificial intelligence and the 4IR. And what they've done currently is they've created a space for anybody. There's no restriction as far as age is concerned, but a lot of young people have been on this site. It's called Digital Nation Africa, DNA in short. And what they've done is that they have a lot of information pertaining to technology, pertaining to IT, and it gives you, as an individual, the freedom of studying and learning at your own pace, and you get certified by IBM. Currently, they have approached UKZN to empower our students with this knowledge that would benefit them after they graduate in whichever program they do. So Digital Nations Africa is a platform that would benefit young people or any age group that wants to understand the actual technology and artificial intelligence and give you the credibility of learning something and certifying yourself. Thank you.
Yeah, to answer his question, the youth have a lot of knowledge, but they don't have a platform to which they should express themselves. So I think they should gather themselves up with a lot of confidence, and then they start practicing what they're taught, they put it in practice. There is a statement our director normally uses: give a man a fish and you will feed him for a day, but teach a man to fish and you will feed him for a lifetime. So I think they should fish for a lifetime.
And of course, the psychologist doesn't work after hours. Otherwise, he's going to send a bill. There was the issue around the struggles that I think her name is Precious Mazibuko. She was talking about the challenges they have. Do we have the infrastructure to implement the fourth industrial revolution? Again, I'm going to answer from my own perspective and say, actually, it starts in the mind again. Because until such time we believe we have the skills and we have the capacity, we will continue to doubt ourselves. So even the countries and continents that may now claim to be civilized, they did start somewhere, and we therefore need to start somewhere as Africans and say, with whatever we have, we can be able to achieve much, much more. Thanks.
You know, the point which I raised earlier, looking at it within the global context, is extremely very important. You know, when you look at the world now, the world now is just like what is usually described as a global village. It's connected. And then within this context of connectedness, there are certain systems and powers. I'll just pick one. One of those powers is global capitalism. And then within this system, always, you have two groups of people. You have losers and you have winners. Capitalism as a system is very simple. It has the ability to generate a lot of wealth here, to generate a lot of poverty there. It does two things simultaneously. Now, where do you fit Africa? Now, when it comes to the fourth industrial revolution, I think it's part of this technological change within international capitalist system. Definitely we need certain skills. We need to know what is artificial intelligence. How does it work? What sort of value does it add? What is big data? How can we use big data in business to make it create more avenues, niches for us to make business, to make money, and the like? You cannot run away from that. You can use it, say, for example, in medicine. Telemedicine nowadays, you can do operation here while the patient is miles away. You need that basic infrastructure. For example, in the context of South Africa, data is extremely very expensive. There are modalities should be made to make data affordable and cheap and valuable. So the issue of broadband comes in. So these are some of the basic things which needs to be done. Now, having said that, I think we shouldn't lose sight. There is something which didn't go well on the continent. That's why you have, I repeat the same point which I made earlier. That's why you have Africans trying to swim across the Mediterranean, running away from home. Why are you running from your own home? You see, so we cannot run away from it. That is the reality. It's seen everywhere. We have few good leaders who are actually trying to build the continent. And when it comes to resources, I think we are blessed with all sorts of resources you could think of. We have everything. Now, the best way of solving a problem is to acknowledge first, guys, we have this challenge. And very basic methodologically, a problem is not something you don't know. It's something you do not understand. You know it, but you don't understand. Your knowledge is limited. How do you build on it?
Thank you very much. Just maybe 3 comments. It appears the way I'll summarize the inputs that has been made is that it's focusing on the dissemination of African achievements, the honoring of the African achievers, and then how do we use the fourth industrial revolution to leapfrog Africa into the competitive market. So it appears to me that all these are relevant issues, and we need to probably put the agency on ourselves, in as much as international capital is great and difficult. We have defeated it before through the breaking down of the slave trade, through the liberation struggles, and so it is possible that even the clutches of capitalism, we can begin to work to loosen them. Now, of course, the examples of the Chinese, the small country to which we had visited with Professor Serrote, Cuba, in which they sit in the shadow of a mighty power, but they've been able to maintain their freedom and continue. So it is possible that you are the agents of change. And the change must begin with you. And we can't expect messiahs to come from outside. Why would they be interested in freeing you? Their interest is to continue to keep you in the place in which Professor Nindi is saying. So how do we use the fourth industrial revolution, the democratization of means of communication, to also break loose and begin to lead? We went to China with Professor Kaya, and we went to the Shanghai Chinese Medicines University. And what they were doing is take traditional medicine, an analysis of how they understand a problem, how do they analyze disease in Chinese medicines. What do they use? They use feet, they use your face, different parts of your faces, so they digitize that, and you will soon be buying that as a tool. How do we, too, use our indigenous knowledge using the converging technologies and leapfrog and be at the cutting stage? That agency is with you. It's not with the government. Always want to sing government, government, government. But if individuals don't have the agency, it's you who influence the government. It's you as stakeholders who vote for governments in. And so we have to learn to take ownership of the process. Thank you.
Science needs to start speaking to people's life every day. We need science that is produced by us, speak to us, that is able to accommodate knowledge from our own perspective, which means in our own African way. And unfortunately, that the science that is taught in Africa is not social inclusive. It's ignore South African perspective on science and contributions towards the field. So we need an inclusive approach, the way science is portrayed, communicated, and practiced. Therefore, we need scientists. We as scientists must play a role to tell our own stories and also explain our own research to the younger generation. Thank you.
I think that's a very good end to the whole process. Thank you very much. And please join me in thanking the panelists for the good discussions that they have actually shared with us. Thank you very much.